Vice President Harris called these, quote, atrocities of unimaginable proportions, but she deferred to the UN on whether they're war crimes. I mean, what else could they be? They are clearly targeting civilians.
I think the time has arrived where our officials can use the term atrocity crimes more liberally. They don't have to say war crimes. They don't have to say crimes against humanity, genocide. These are all atrocity crimes. The day will come when we define whether or not it's specifically a war crime or a crime against humanity. All of them have different standards of proof and evidence, intention, who actually commits these crimes, at what level of command are these crimes orchestrated. But the point is, atrocity crimes have arrived in Ukraine, and that is undeniable. And I think the time really has come for U.S. officials now to sort of use that term. They've said aggression. They've said investigation of war crimes. They've said atrocities of intolerable
Unimaginable
significance.
proportions,
yeah. Yeah. And so really the vernacular is out there. The terminology is out there. But I think it would just be more clarifying for people simply to say atrocity crimes are occurring. It is essential to prevent them from being further committed. And it's also essential for those who have committed them to be punished.
So Putin has done this, the Russians have done this for years, targeting hospitals. We saw it in Syria. You heard my introduction to the piece, to Phil's piece. One New York Times investigation found 4 hospitals targeted in just 12 hours. And this is not, this Mariupol Maternity and Children's Hospital is not even the first Ukrainian hospital in the last 2 weeks. Why does he do this?
Well, I think he does it first and foremost to terrorize the population, to incentivize them to flee as refugees. His tactic was the same in Syria with Assad. You terrorize the civilian population to leave the civilian populated areas, then you level those areas, you reclaim your authority over those areas, and perhaps someday some of those individuals return, but they return under your subjugation. So that's a clear tactic. It is one that is completely oblivious to any consideration of the legality or illegality of the tactic, but it certainly is playing out here. And I might add, Jake, that, you know, President Putin has demonstrated that he knows what is occurring in Ukraine. He's not ignorant of it. He obviously knows. As the top leader, he has the responsibility to prevent those crimes from occurring or to punish those who have committed them if he wasn't able to prevent them. He's clearly doing neither. So he's incriminating himself every single day as the top commander. That means that when he's indicted by the International Criminal Court, and I think that will occur within 2 to 3 months, his is an easier indictment to draft than what we've had in the past, where you don't sometimes know whether the top leader actually is aware of the actual crimes occurring. They don't make public statements about it. They don't advertise themselves as orchestrating the crimes, of orchestrating the invasion.
Right.
But Putin has done so.
One other note about the creating refugees, as I just know from military sources, that Putin loves creating instability in Europe by creating these refugee crises that cause all sorts of political issues as well as financial issues. Lastly, what do you say to somebody who says, okay, Putin gets indicted by the International Criminal Court. Russia's not a member of the International Criminal Court, and the United States isn't either for that matter. So what? What does that mean?
The answer is it doesn't matter. The International Criminal Court has full jurisdiction over Ukraine in this matter for the investigation. 39 countries referred it to the ICC legitimately. When he's indicted, and when the generals are indicted, the sanctions that have been imposed upon Russia, the most severe in history, will not be lifted until 2 things happen. 1, the Russian military withdraws from the Ukraine and the Ukraine restores its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And 2, Putin and the indicted generals, the indicted fugitives from justice, are surrendered to The Hague. It would be implausible for the sanctions to be lifted until that happens. This is exactly what we did in the Balkans with Milosevic, Karadzic, Mladic. We kept the sanctions on Serbia until they were surrendered. And I see no basis to think that European countries or even the United States, Canada, will tolerate them not being surrendered. Those sanctions will stay in place until they are surrendered.
Vice President Harris
The hypocrisy of the United States knows no bounds. And when it comes to war crimes, no nation on the face of the earth has committed more war crimes than the United States of America. This is not speculation. This is not theory. This is historical fact. And I'm going to keep it recent. And let's start with the obvious, the Iraq War. As an egregious war crime as there is of the last 20 years. Total number of deaths depend on whatever site that you're using when it comes to, say, the 2007 Research Business Poll, the 2006 Lancet study, the Iraq Body Count Project, PLOS Medicine, Iraq Family Health Survey, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. The list is endless. Anywhere between 1 to 1.5 million people dead, based on nothing more than fictitious information presented by the CIA and the State Department to Secretary of State Colin Powell before the United Nations Security Council. Were anybody in the Bush cabinet arrested, charged for war crimes, crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity? These are the crimes listed by the Rome Statutes, the International Criminal Courts. And since the United States is not part of the International Criminal Courts, and I think it's obvious why they continue to do war crimes, because they don't have to be held responsible. Two civil wars, a complete decimation of the country, which allowed for a rise of Islamic militancy, the Islamic State in Iraq, which became the Islamic State and the Levant, by destroying the infrastructure and by liquidating the army and police, which allowed for chaos, anarchy, murder, rape, robbery to become rampant in the country without any intervention from the United States and their coalition partners, who are just as guilty. Afghanistan. Approximately 240,000 people have been killed. More than 80,000 civilians. Not to mention the rendition program of innocent Afghans, Pashtuns, who were mercilessly tortured by the rendition program led by the CIA. These are war crimes. And of course, the bombings of the Bagram torture, prisoner abuse, the Kandahar massacre, the Kunduz hospital airstrike, which I did a video on, which happened under the Obama administration, in which Obama gave the authorization to conduct a drone strike at the Kunduz Trauma Center, in which 42 people were killed and 30 injured. Abu Ghraib torture and prisoner abuse, the Mahmoudiyya killings in Iraq, in which U.S. soldiers raped and killed a 14-year-old Iraqi child by the name of Abir Qasim Hamza al-Janabi. The Waywan district murders, in which murders of 3 Afghan civilians were perpetrated by a group of U.S. Army soldiers who referred to themselves as the Kill Team. The Nisour Square massacre, killed by members of Blackwater Security Consulting, in which 20 people were injured and 17 killed. The Hamdia incident, which involved members of the U.S. Marines in relation to the shooting that resulted in the death of an Iraqi man in Al Hamdiya, a small village west of Baghdad. His name was Hashim Goad. And let's not keep it with the Republicans. Barack Obama. And to you people of the left wearing the Ukrainian flags in your avatar, as if you aren't guilty of supporting war crimes in your name. You most likely voted for Obama, who committed some of the most egregious war crimes of the last 15 years, including a drone operation extended to Somalia and Yemen between 2010 and 2011, which resulted in more destructive deaths in that time period. And they did it under the belief they were targeting Al-Qaeda members, including Obama's first drone strike, which was in Yemen, killing 55 people, including 21 children, 10 of them under the age of 5. Now, just imagine if those were Americans. The global legacy media would be outraged, but yet, because it was under the flag of the United States, it becomes an inconvenience. Twelve of those women, 5 of them were pregnant. Even far more civilian casualties came out of Afghanistan through Barack Obama's time in office than in Bush. Afghanistan had war rained upon them, with the administration viciously dropping 1,337 drone strikes in 2016 alone. Total that year, the Obama administration, in total, dropped 26,171 bombs across 7 countries: Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan. Let's talk about what's going on with Libya. This is a Hillary Clinton war. For those who believe that Clinton was a better option than Donald Trump, the lesser of two evils is still evil. Now, the Libya 9-year war on civilians, according to the UN, is incalculable, with rising casualties and now 1 million people now needing assistance. In the second Libyan civil war, which is an extension of the first civil war, we have seen a number of casualties, including refugees, which are scattered all throughout Europe. As of right now, approximately 30,000 people are dead and over 500,000 displaced, because the United States thought it was a good idea to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi in hopes of revamping the country. Those are Clinton's words, not mine. The casualties of the Syrian civil war under Obama is anywhere between 500 to 600,000 dead. Over 1 million displaced, maybe even more than that. And that's a very liberal number. According to the Syrian Center for Policy Research, it's 470,000 dead. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, 600,000 dead. all with the United States entering the conflict on the pretext they were fighting the war on terror, while using covert CIA operations like Timber Sycamore. They were funding and training the very jihadists that they were allegedly bombing in the hopes of overthrowing the democratically elected Bashar al-Assad. And of course, need I remind you about the current largest humanitarian crisis in the world, and it's not Ukraine. And for those people who clamor that they're anti-war and that the Republicans are pro-Russian, well, you're just a bunch of hypocrites. As of right now, regarding the United Nations report projected that the death toll from Yemen's war will reach 377,000 at the end of 2021. Well, it is now March of 2022, and we have now reached 420,000 dead. How are we responsible? Well, under the Biden administration, in which he ran during the elections on not supporting Saudi Arabia in the war, in his first 2 weeks in office, the Biden administration authorized a military aid package of $500 million. Just another broken promise by a president of the United States. Most of that was military aid, in which it is used on the country of Yemen, where, of course, in war, civilians are the biggest casualty. And of course, you also have war crimes perpetrated by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. The NATO bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999 lasted 78 days, which saw over 10,000 killed and 850,000 displaced. The 1995 bombing campaign in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in which over 2,000 bombs were dropped, 708 of them were precision guided. That led to the deaths of hundreds, displacing 50,000 people. You must ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, those of the left and right, how does your hypocrisy sound when history is being replayed for you to listen? Or will you willfully ignore the crimes of the very presidents you support by voting, and then later giving excuses to? I don't just blame them, I blame you. And until you finally realize that there is no left and right, that there is one gang in the White House when it comes to foreign policy, save a few differences and agendas. And when you finally realize that, you finally realize that we are not the enemy, the people of the United States, that you're led to believe from the Republican and Democrats, the whites and the blacks, the Christian and the Jews and the Muslims, the male and the female, the transsexual, the bisexual, the homosexual. We're one human community. When you realize that you're bigger than what you are and that you're not an insignificant individual who needs to feel important by implementing himself or herself into ideology, is when you finally are free from being a slave to the state. The US government is the enemy, and it's high time we start paying attention.